Okay, good morning, guys. It is Wednesday, April 21st, 2021, and we're going to get started here with the pre-market analysis. So what I'd like to do is jump again to the high time frames and just point out that we've been saying since we made the all-time high at 4183.50 that there really are no signs of exhaustion on our high time frames. So this pullback is actually a little bit further than I really would have expected. 3-month or quarterly looks very bullish with no signs of pullback. Same thing on the monthly, same thing on the weekly. When we jump down to the daily, what I am noticing and what we talked about yesterday is that if we do not break this low here at 41.01 quarter, the low that we made on April 13th, then we will have a very glaring divergence on the daily chart, and that's a bullish continuation. So if we can hold 01 quarter, and we have seen in the past, sometimes it will actually break it by a point or a few ticks, and then it goes. And so we're going to want to watch that level today. I put it in the morning report that 41.01 is going to be important here for the bulls to defend. And then, of course, we have 41.10.50, which is the previous daily low. So if we can hold those two levels, we might end up starting to see a recovery here from this, about 90-point sell-off. Now, when we jump down to our 4-hour, that's where we started to get a bearish indication off the all-time high. Again, with no confirmation on the daily, which made me skeptical of a really big protracted sell-off. But we did have on the 4-hour that bearish signal, and then when you dial down again to the hourly, the 30-minute, the 10-minute, we had pretty much everything down. So 4-hour down, we had bearishness off the high. And so we got a much bigger pullback than I would have expected. But it's important to point out that we're not going to see the indication every time there's a pullback. So every time that we get a 20, 50, 90-point pullback in the market, we don't necessarily have our signal. It's just more often than not we're going to get the signal. So this is not 100%. But what I want to point out right now, so remember the high time frames all still look bullish with no signs of pullback, with the daily showing the potential of a bullish continuation pattern if we can hold 01 quarter. When we jump to the 4-hour, what I'm noticing here is that we had off of, I believe, what is our overnight low here at 41.13, we did get some bullishness here on the 4-hour. And so people ask, like, well, if you start to see a bullish divergence on the daily, how do you actually get an entry? And how do you know when that daily, if it has a little bit of space like we had yesterday, we had, 20 or 30 points to go and still be bullish, how do we start to nail the actual turn? And the way you nail it is you start to get these indications on each of the smaller time frames. And so when the daily is showing potential bullishness or a potential bull divergence, we then jump to the shorter time frames. And when that 4-hour gives us a really nice bull divergence, and then the hourly agrees and the 30 agrees, and then every time frame gives us an agreement, we typically can get a good idea of where that actual bottom or where the turn is actually going to occur. Now this could potentially build up, and we could get lower lows, and every time frame can keep giving us bullishness, and that's where it can get a little bit difficult. But typically what you're going to see is the higher time frames start to show an indication, and then the shorter time frames below it will start to, one might show, the other might not, but then eventually they'll all start to come into alignment, and then that's where you get your turn. So on the 4-hour, what I am noticing is off the overnight low, we did get that bullish signal. So right now we do have kind of a daily bullish potential, and then we have a clear bullish pattern on the 4-hour off the overnight low. So we'll continue to dial down and just kind of see if we're getting agreement on some of these shorter time frames. Now I do want to point out off the highs here, there's not really a super clear divergence forming, so not really a super clear bearish divergence off the high that we're looking at right now. As you can see, we pushed up in price just a little bit from the pretty much the 4-hour bar that closed yesterday at the end of the day. And we also pushed up just very slightly on RVI. It's literally like a percentage point, maybe not even that much. Yeah, about a percentage point. And so there's really no problem on the upside here. What I do see is a very clear bullish signal off that low. So far everything's bullish. Daily showing potential bullish divergence. 4 hours showing a clear bullish divergence. And now we're looking to the 60-minute for the 1 hour here. And remember, yesterday we did have that bullish signal off the low. We also had some other bullish signals, and that's why we had a bullish bias coming into the open, and we were able to get that long from around 42 up to 50. So that ended up being negated, and they broke through. There was not enough bull strength. And so the bears are, like I said in the morning forecast, are kind of out of their hibernation, at least just for their midnight snack. I don't know how long this is really going to go on for. So what I'm noticing here is that off the double bottom from yesterday, we got a very clear bullish divergence on this hourly chart. And now in this overnight session, in our Globex session, there's really nothing conclusive on either side. In fact, on the top end, on the highs, there's really no signs of bearishness, and on the lows, at least in the overnight here, and I might have to revise that here as I'm looking, but overall, there's really no signs of bearishness off the highs. And then in this overnight chop here, we did not see any signs of bullishness. But if you look at the most recent low here, okay, this candle closed at 6 a.m. so Pacific, so just about 15 minutes ago. And from the most recent candle that closed, we actually do have a pretty decent bullish divergence. All right, so 41.13 is where we got the 4-hour divergence. And then you can see on the 1 hour, we got it off 41.14 here on this test to push back down. So we do have bullishness coming in, and every, I could say, high time frame is showing potential bullishness. So we want to keep that in mind. Of course, this is a seller's market, as you can see, but we will go ahead and look at our intermediate time frames to see what they're saying. So far everything looks fairly bullish, with the condition that if that 41.10 breaks and then ultimately 41.01 breaks, that whole bullish picture is off the table. So let's go to the 30-minute here. And again, off of that overnight low, off of the double bottom that we made yesterday, or at least it was maybe off by a tick, so very close to a double bottom, we did have some divergence in that area. Now, if we look over to the current time, we do have the same bullish indication that we had on the hourly off that low. So we pushed higher on RVI, but we got just a tick or two lower on price. And so even if price was exactly the same here, we would have a clear exotic divergence. Let me just check 41.15 and then the low there, 41.1475. So pretty much the same low, but a much higher RVI. So from every time frame, we are seeing bullishness at the lows here. And I did not see any signs of bearishness off of the highs in the overnight on the hourly. Let me just jump to the 4-hour really quickly. In the 4-hour we said there was really not much there. And the daily just doesn't have enough we're not zoomed in enough on the daily to see it. But so far, no clear signs of bearishness off these highs, but we are starting to build up bullishness on every time frame that we've looked at so far. Now, when we jump to the 10, that's where I get just a little sign of the sell-off that we got just in this pre-market here. So if you look at the highs in the overnight, you can see that overall we trended up here. But overall, the RVI has now trended down. And so from that point, at we can call the overnight high, we did get a 10-minute indication of bearishness, and from that point we're now down just about almost 20 points. And so that might be all we get. But remember, we had a lot of bullish signals off of all the lows that we've been making and on every time frame. And now on the 10-minute, we also had that double bottom that ended up giving us bullishness. And then where we are right now, you can see that price overall from the overnight low, and even from these lows that we're testing right now, we've essentially kind of pushed up, and then we were pretty much flat from these previous two prices in the overnight. But the RVI has definitely come down significantly from those two, right? So this is also confirming the picture that we see on the 30-minute and the 60-minute. And so overall, pretty much every time frame is giving us bullishness off the lows, and then we just see on one time frame so far, on one of the shorter intermediate time frames, some bearishness off the overnight high, but we've now got almost a 20-point pullback. So that might be all that we get. Now we need to keep in mind here that this system is not 100%. So although we do have almost every time frame agreeing down here, we are in a very strong bearish push here, 90 points in the last 2 days. And so we have to keep in mind that that 01 quarter is going to probably be the final stand. And so if we get if this does end up selling off more, if we get the same confluence on every time frame in this area, then I think it's worth trying to see if we do get that protracted push back up to retrace this correction that we made over the last 2 days. But for now, what we have our case, it's overall very bullish. Again, unless this breaks, if 4110 breaks, which is really going to be where all of the bullish signals we've gotten on every time frame have formed in this very general area, if that breaks, then unfortunately, although we have a beautiful case this morning, it's just not what the market is going to respect. But again, it's not 100%, so sometimes we're going to see some issues there. So let's go to our 3-minute, and I'm guessing that on the 3-minute we also got somewhat of bearishness off of that overnight high. So we'll take a look here, and you can see that we pushed way up in price, and then RVI stayed the same, although you can kind of see RVI did push up as well. So the 3-minute did not really have a very clear bearish signal to agree with the 10-minute for this sell-off. So we'll have to watch now. You can see that we did get bullishness off of that low. So now, every time frame is giving us a very clear bullish signal off these lows. And so overall, I can't argue with the signals. The signals are all telling me that we're bullish off of the double bottom that we made overnight or yesterday. And then on this overnight chop that we see, we are getting some bullish signals off the lows with not a lot of signs of bearishness off of the highs, except for that 1 10-minute bearish signal that has led to this 20-point sell-off, or just under 20 points. So that's kind of where we are this morning. And so everything looks very bullish despite what's been going on in the market for the last 2 days. And so we're going to be looking for longs. But if we do get a clear 1-minute, 5-12, and 3-minute sell signal, we're going to trade that signal. But ultimately, we would like to see some buys to take this long if this is going to be the low, because if it is, then we could have a nice 50, 60, 70, 100 point push from this low. And so it's worth giving it a shot. So right now I'm noticing that we're about probably very close to a 38 retracement. So a 38 is right back to the previous support in the market around 2150 here. And so we'll see what they can do there. What I'd like to do though is jump back to, let's see, let's take a look at the 10-minute. We have a little bit of time before the open, and let me just look. There are no really nice trades setting up at the moment, so just want to take this time to kind of step back and look at the overall retracements that we're dealing with. And you can see that from the major swing high here to the swing low here, where we have a very clear leg, if we look at the retracement area, we're basically having trouble here at the 50%. So kind of interesting to note, and this is something we go over in our study sessions every week, are some of these really awesome trades. And it's just interesting to note that we pushed from 41.51, I think, or 50.75, came down to the previous daily low here at 41.10.50, and when we bounced, we had resistance right around 38%. It did break it by a few points, pulled back, we bounced again, and we found resistance directly at the 50%, and we pulled back. And then now you can see we're having a little bit of trouble kind of getting through that area. And we did have the swing low here as well. So we had a lot of things lining up. This was actually a really nice trade. We had clear divergence, at least from a 10-minute perspective. It was a 50% retracement, and that previous swing low, a support in the market, became a very clear resistance. So really nice textbook stuff. Just I wanted to point out really quickly. But overall, we're stuck trying to break through this 50% level. And so a lot of times you'll see them test the 30, pull back, test the 50, pull back, test the 61, and then, and then who knows from there. But you do see that stair-step type pattern happen pretty often. And so we got to keep that in mind. There's one other perspective that we also need to keep in mind, and that is that our CP, our prediction point, was at 41.59, and the next CP isn't all the way until we get down to about 40.70. And so from prediction point theory, the idea is that once we break and we hold below a CP, which are the blue lines there, then the market should then travel to the next CP. And so 40.70 would not be off the table. And then if you look, I love this, the retracement, this leg that we were looking at in terms of retracements, if you look at the extension, the 100% extension of that leg is basically the CP at 40.70. So we got some nice confluence there. Now remember, we're still bullish. We're looking for the market to hold ideally this 41.10 area, 41.10 to 41.14, and then 41.01 is going to be that last stand. But if that ends up breaking, then we do know that we have some decent confluence down here around 40.70, and then even if we look back at price action, there is some decent resistance in the market right in that area as well. Okay, so there are good things lining up at that level if our bullish sentiment in coming into the open does not end up holding. But pretty clear that every time frame is giving us that bullishness. So let's move the big intermediate away here, and we'll just focus now on our short time frames to see if we can at least get a decent entry coming into the open. So right now, it's kind of little garbagey right now. A lot of little chop in here. Our 1 minute is not necessarily giving us anything too sexy. The 512 is also not necessarily giving us anything too sexy either. You can see we had a little indication of a sell-off here from a 512 perspective, and then we did get, a 3-point sell-off from there. But overall, nothing too sexy at the moment. We're just 2 to 3 minutes until the open. And so we'll wait. We have some good levels above us here. We've got the 38 retracement, which is probably going to end up lining up here with the 200 moving average. So if we do get somewhat of a bearish signal, we might want to hold off just to see if we can get a pullback to get long based off of our overall bias for the morning. And I am looking over at my 3 minute, and 3 minute as well, not giving us anything too clear in this little choppy area. So this might be a case where we have to kind of sit back for a second and let the market give us a nice clear signal to try. And I am noticing I'm going to get rid of the retracement here because we can see we've got previous swing low in the market and the 200 right in this general area. And then our 50% is kind of right up where 23/4 is, remember from yesterday. And the 61 happens to be pretty much the KP. I mean, it was almost exact. So we've already got the levels kind of set out on the charts. We don't need that retracement on there. And so we'll see. We've got 1 minute here until the open, a little less than a minute. Unfortunately, there's nothing clear unless you guys want to point something out that I'm not seeing. There's just a little bit of like a bearish divergence if it doesn't break 20/4 on the 1 minute and the 5/12. But outside of that, there's really nothing too sexy. So we might have to just kind of be patient into the open today. We got 20 seconds. And we're going to open here in a second. Remember I said there was a little bearishness if that doesn't break at 20/4. So this pullback actually makes sense. But again, with short time frames, you can only expect 4 to 8 ticks. So we'll sit and watch and we'll wait for our next setup.